for strategic advantage. Now, today, our main focus is on the technology, the day one, the emerging technologies, all. We'll talk more about it. Now, the next topic is we are talking about data science as a strategic advantage. So how does that help organizations to succeed? Okay, so I would like to welcome Kusumakar Pandey. Kusumakarji, are you there in the call?
Hello, Mr. Abdul. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, wherever you are. Yes, I'm very much on the call.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining the call. So let me give a quick round of introduction. Kusumakar is a strategy and execution specialist with over 16 years of experience in building next-gen brands. He uses data science, MarTech, and financial analytics to drive rapid growth. He built the fastest growing consumer brand in his segment, launched a multi-billion-dollar reduced risk category, and led profit centers in consumer and tech businesses. So we can talk about data science part, how it helps organizations. I think you are the best one to talk about it. Kusumakarji, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm attempting to share my slides. I hope it's visible.
It is visible. Yeah, you can proceed.
All right. So thank you so much, and really would like to congratulate the Data Labs team and the Global Strategy Summit presenters and everyone who is listening to us today. It's a very important discussion every year. Every year you have been holding this, and this brings about a perspective which ensures that organizations take accord of something that's a little more long-term. Strategy as a function has to play a role in helping organization metamorphose into what's going to make them long-lasting organization. It's quite often cited that so many organizations that were there in the Fortune 500 list just about a decade and a half back aren't there on the list. And there are many reasons cited. I believe that if these organizations had a very functioning and robust strategy function, some of these changes would have been handled much better. So here is a big change that we are all talking of these days, which is the advent of artificial intelligence, increased compute power with quantum computing. There's major strides being done in all areas of bioinformatics and biotechnologies. This is bound to have impact on our traditional and legacy businesses. So I would be coming from a background in more legacy or traditional organizations and how they are trying to make an effort to transfer into more modern data science and AI-driven organizations, and what are the challenges that one is facing there. So if that topic seems a bit slower and boring than some of the Google or Amazon kind of presentations, pardon me for that. I represent a very tangible industry, and though I won't be giving very specific examples from my company, I would definitely be more grounded in something that you can actually see changing in front of you. So we're talking in context of data science and strategy. This was the literature, if you see, that some of the top strategists on this panel and other organizations have really relied on. Going back from Mike Porter's work on competitive advantage to looking at Chan Kim's work on the blue ocean strategy, good to great, laying emphasis on execution by Ramcharan and Larry Bossidy. That's not a bookmark there, but this was our base text, and a lot of it continues to stay relevant. A lot of it is very helpful in providing us a a thought process that prepares our organizations, that we help transcend various challenges. Only challenge that this literature has is that a lot of it was written in the pre-data science era. There was a lot of visionary work happening in terms of thinking through that what computers can do. But at the same time, the kind of compute power, the kind of generative and now agentic AI that's come up, and the nature and access of algorithms that was limited to a few organizations earlier is now much more widely available. And that has set to change the strategy paradigm and framework. So whenever I start discussing this with some of my friends, peers, colleagues in different functions and different organizations, you often get to hear that, yes, we have always known now for fairly long, data is the oil, is the new oil. The new gold rush is the data rush. We as an organization are very rich on data, and we are using it to make our decisions. And there's a lot of talk about data-driven decision-making. The challenge is that if you start looking at these data sets, you'd realize that they're not transcending into insights. Insights are scarce. Data is still much more abundant. Now, the insights that we still generate out of these data pieces are quite often based on lots of biases and prior set perspectives. I've practically heard in meetings, data rooms talking about the fact that all data translates itself into normal data. And the bell curve can explain a lot of things. It does, but it also doesn't. And all data is not normal. All data cannot be normalized. And the power of algorithms and the power of data science related advanced mathematics is much more visible when we have to make much tougher decisions. So this gap between what data that we have and the kind of decisions that the organizations now need to make, that gap is bridged by the analytics function. So a bit of a correction, Abduljeet, there. My talk is much more on strategy, but it's about saying that, but you are also right, that it's about talking about the imperativeness of data science and data systems into our strategic frameworks. Now, thank you. So now we look at the kind of perspectives that data science as a function does. It's about helping organizations make choices, helping leadership make choices. And you have had a great lineup of speakers through the day. If I could attend a few of the sessions. And I recollect the first speaker talking about the emergent strategy, emergent data strategy, emergent strategic approach rather than the much more direct, very, very, very definitive strategy approach. And all these frameworks are relying on some of the key questions that we have always had and some of the key frameworks that we have always had. There's the 5 forces paradigm. There is the SWOT analysis, but many of these pieces are changing. Now, in the 5 forces framework, the question that I often have to work on with my organization is, who is the customer and the consumer, and not just think about what is the power of the customer or consumer in the equation. The partner ecosystem is changing. So it's not just enough to know that the traditional partner in terms of the distribution arms that we had, what is their equation right now? There are new partners emerging. We'll talk about it a bit, but I can touch as against our legacy distribution centers, it's about the emergence of QCOM. And those are the partners that are emerging. Competition is changing. We might be extremely focused and believing that, these are the two other companies that I have to beat or meet in at the marketplace. But there is another product solution that's being developed by a new age company, and the new competitor is emerging. And to top it all, what is the product or offering that I have? Because one group of my consumer sees the services that I put along with the product much more valuable. The other group sees that product, but for another purpose. So the consumer is starting to define, or the customer is starting to define what my offer and product is, and what should I be able to charge for, and what should go as a freebie along with it. So in that sense, the simple 5 forces framework of Porter has to undergo some bit of change. I have to constantly be answering, who are these people? I'll jump and come back to the warped sword bit a little later, but in this world which we had been solving, a lot of the literature had been written, was much more basis the learnings from the post-World War era. And then there was a lot of discussion, and then the definition of the VUCA world came up. But for the last decade onwards, the world is not just volatile, it's brittle. It's not just uncertain, but it's quite anxious. And the complexities and ambiguity have given place to a confirmed view that you can't comprehend what's going to happen. So it's the Barney world that we are solving for. And this thought process, therefore, replaces solving for a set company's business model to be able to survive the VUCA world. From that, it changes that I will change my business model. I'll change my business offering. I'll change the way I do business rapidly. And I would be better off that way as against doing something that just tries to keep my set business model alive. And rapid technological advancement has a lot to do with it. We don't even know what kind of impact AI is going to happen. If my consumer product was selling a lot around office blocks and work from home or hybrid working and AI-driven workplaces with much more reduced manpower changes this location of work, my distribution strategy has to undergo a change. And that's why the perspective is out here that be prepared for this constant change, and nothing else other than the data science based strategy prepares you better. Many of these set frameworks would help you think through. Strategy has to merge much more with this function. The strengths are turning to be our limits. As I mentioned, that my distribution, a company, how else do you explain an ex-consumer cosmetic company that has got real good consumer base, has got over a few hundred retail outlets with beauty advisors and others, gets valued for a couple of thousand crores, over 1,000 crore sale, gets at most a 1.5x kind of a multiple. But a new company is bought over, minimalist in this case, by Unilever in India for 3,000 crores. Now, what kind of multiples of sales are there? But it's about the data science backbone that they would have been able to put in place that gives a sense that they would be able to grow much more rapidly. The consumer, whom are we solving for? I touch upon it a little later, but I'll hurry through some of those later slides. But I do want to form a perspective that the consumers we were trying to understand were the Gen Alpha, and we were trying to understand the lingo of Gen Z. We have the beta generation, and we don't know which stereotype, which archetype, which angle of our consumer persona that we should be able to ascribe to them. At the same time, there would be some universal truths that will stay. As in a popular interview by now, Jeff Bezos spoke of some of the universal truths that he sees from his lens. There would be some for your businesses as well. For instance, consumers would always look for prices getting lower. They would always look for greater convenience. They may not choose to hustle for it, but they will make their decision on the basis of some of these universal truths. And I think the international polity, the role of the state, etc., the way it has changed over the last decade is giving clearly a sense that the next couple of decades are going to be very different from the kind of world that we were starting to believe, or the world order that we were starting to believe is clearly set. A few countries at the top, the few countries developing, moving. If they work hard, they will move back, move up into the developing and the developed arena. Probably that's not going to happen that ways. And we still have to see what kind of policies US will be coming out with. That's going to have a lot of impact. So that would be my nature of conversation today. I wanted to form a good basis because you were moving in from a very, very intense session by Mr. Gauthier on driving success from your digital factory. It's a very change in gears. So also towards the end of the working day out here in India on Friday evening. So I would be focusing much more on the top 4 or 5 questions, the forces that will define the business. But when we are to make these choices, which is the core function of strategy, and there is a bit of a shadow that you see of a book that has been very close to my heart, The Long View. The scenario planning perspective continues to be very, very significant. Just that we will be solving as against the 4-quadrant perspective of 2 extremities on two axes, and then defining 2 or 3 narratives, canceling one particular scenario and having trying to arrive at a single world view. The perspective now is a multiple scenario game, and the compute power and the role of algorithms makes that possible. So you would be better off for your organizations, I believe, if you were to enable your leadership team with a detailing of more than one scenario. So the nuances that will emerge in this environment would be very, very micro, even, and that could be done very rapidly, as against, you having a strategy session where all the leadership meets, and there's a single worldview that's formed, which is narrated in detail, and still some aspects get left. And when you're trying to get back to regular work and you're cascading down that strategy that emerges out of those scenarios, the choices that you have to make don't seem to marry very well. And that's where the role of technology starts playing in a lot more, and the recent technology. So the scenarios with various weights and values determined by your algorithm, which is basing itself on multiple other factors, can help create these scenarios. The narration that you need to do of this worldview, you need to tell stories. Human beings, the way Yuval Noah Harari puts it, that most civilizations are driven by some story that they have told themselves. right? And they want to, so if I have grown up in an environment, and most of us have, where at end of the day, if you're doing good, everything turns out to be good. We do want to hold that view, but may not be true in certain scenarios. And you might have to accept that it's not going to get better going that path. Some of that realism can be brought in, and your narrative can still have the drama so that it engages people, and strategy professionals would know the narration that I'm talking of, but it does not need to be mythical in nature. It can be much more scientific. It can be much more data oriented. What you can also do is that in the same strategy and working session, you can arrive at solution themes. And these solution themes can also have success factors attributed to them. So there's a lot of use of this modern technology in the role and function of strategy. And therefore, I started believing that basically the technology function, the data science function, strategy function, and the risk function are functions that have much more in common, and then they need to probably amalgamate at a certain level. A new org structure needs to emerge as against having them and hosting them in silos. And what it results in is in a very enhanced decision-making paradigm. Your organization can really cut on, and in my experience, have achieved quite often, really cut on potential financial losses. And which was, as you look back, you realize that it was not possible in the traditional strategy approach. It would have come down to firefighting that situation more by the execution team. And that's the juncture when the CEO starts believing that is the strategy function a very heavy cost center. So to manage those situations, I think the best way is to have strategy, frameworks, and execution design integrated in a manner that you are able to exhibit results and outcomes financially. So the big question, who is the customer? Who is the consumer? And these people are also changing. The employees are also having a lot of influence in your consumption basket, and they need to be basically seen as overall a community of people who touch base with your organization once your offering is out there for them to consume. And today, always, who is the consumer? Who is the customer? I remember my professor at Institute of Management Ahmedabad, who used to really hammer down this question, who is the consumer, as an access question. But the issue is that that question is much more relevant today. And we touched a bit on the generation, but that's the perspective of it. It was only now that we were trying to figure out how Gen X is different from all the needs of baby boomers in the past, and millennials were feeling crushed between Gen X and Gen Alpha at the other end. We were complaining about the behavior patterns of Gen Alpha and Gen Z, not being able to understand their lingo. And then there's Gen Beta. In 10 to 12 years, they are going to really impact decision-making, purchasing behavior of a family. And if, for instance, they are going to choose very different vocations, if they are not going to go to the traditional version of school that we have had, by virtue of technology, by virtue of their learning approaches, their prioritization in terms of what do they want to learn and how would they be learning. What's going to happen to a lot of edtech business that has been thought through so far, or what would happen to the traditional schooling and education system. they would have their own sets of challenges. It's not a bed of roses for all of them. They are not uniform, different geographies, different parts of the world. They are going to be very different. And they have this added huge problem of global warming, pollution, lack of trust, lack of optimism because the world order is changing significantly, and the income disparities. So very different consumer, particularly for global multinational organizations, that becomes a perspective. Pardon me if I would be using some controversial words here. I don't mean them in that exactitude, but I feel that when we look at these consumer groups, we tend to miss out a lot. And market research quite often looks at creating a product and then testing with its audience whether it's relevant, it's working or not, or tries to find those gaps. But that's not how, for instance, as we know all now anecdotally, Apple phone was built. If a consumer was to be asked that instead of having a range of colors, if you were to be given just one white color, now it's in a couple of other colors, what would have been the choice? So it's about getting the consumer insight. There's a famous case study of Kraft Heinz, who have built this along with Google Cloud, this platform, which constantly receives consumer insights at various instances. And it's about, that's something closer to what we were calling of emergent strategy. And data science enables these precise consumer segmentation, all the talk about predictive analytics. I have not seen a lot of organizations doing it very effectively, but I hope that it will get better, including mine. But it is a significant progress from where the traditional time series based projection models were. There are many more modeling and algorithmic approaches, but today what we have is much more advanced than what we had, and it would get much more precise. Dynamic content optimization, allowing business to tailor their messages and offerings to a specific consumer. That's what we are talking of. And AI's role over and above this, that's going to be transformative, because already there are organizations that allow me to have, as a marketer, a consumer message through the sports person, not just of a popular sport, but of a relevant sport, speaking the language of that particular consumer segment. That sports person from a team who is much more so speaking and sharing that message and experience about his energy drink to that specific consumer group, rather than having a one size advertisement in a very expensive manner translated in various languages to people. So that's where we are. And I hope we are progressing fine, Mr. Kuldeep and Mr. Abdul. We can progress.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Right. So the way data science allows us to address some of these challenges is by looking at the consumer, the channel partner, and each of these problem areas and situations at a unit level. What I call N is equal to 1. It's a step beyond the literature that talks of personalization. Personalization is fine. It looks at it more from the consumer end and more from the features. Here you can now create products, solutions, and solution themes that are relevant for a specific consumer. And you can create a massive sense of pride in one of your channel partner through an incentive that's designed just for her or him versus another one. And that's how in our experiment at our end, we have been able to create a kind of loyalty program that exists nowhere else, turning nudge into an algorithm. And then every situation is unique. We normally tend to cluster them, and we say this is a festive season, and the kind of offering and solution that we have to have so that one pack with festivity goes across. But now different portions of the country would have festivities at different junctures, and you can create solutions for that particular market through the use of all the data science driven technology. And so far, being able to provide exclusivity was at a significant cost. It was possible being done earlier as well, but if it was exclusive, it was supposed to be extremely expensive. Technology is still not doing, it's doing it at some areas. I would have to be honest that it's not so ubiquitous, but it does show promise that it can be, you can have boutique offerings for your specific customer in a very, very exclusive manner without breaking the bank. So we've talked of how do we look at the scenario? Who is the customer, consumer, employee? Now, whom am I competing against? After all, it's a marketplace. Red ocean strategy, blue ocean strategy, all that is fine. But if I don't know whom am I competing against, which of these strategy mixes that should I choose? And these competitors are emerging actually from every corner, and they're changing the game. You are the ship, and then there are these frigates that are coming around from all direction or yachts at massive pace, or there is a new island being created and you don't need to go on the ship. So that's speaking a bit metaphorically, but legacy players too are defining their play. So, the new age organization companies which have data science itself as the cornerstone of their strategy. And then there are these legacy organizations that are metamorphosing themselves into completely new types of organization while they still have that muscle and brand name pull. And at some juncture, I believe these organizations will fuse and become one. But right now, traditional hotel industry versus Airbnb, they are at clash. There is right now collision happening. And data science does offer necessary tools and analytical capabilities to even these large legacy organizations. Maybe a Ritz-Carlton room could be available on Airbnb at some point of time. And the perspective that these legacy organizations bring in through their years of understanding, it's important to be able to protect that and preserve that also for organization. And that learning should not get lost. And then that's where also there is a role of these data science libraries. So these are some of the very famous examples. I won't go into detail of these, but clearly you can see that these are organizations, Netflix, Amazon, Google, these are organizations, Airbnb, they have formed their business model itself on the base of data science. These are Jeff Bezos held a PhD in mathematics and algorithms. These organizations, Moderna, that was able to turn around. I know there is a lot of controversy right now about the mRNA vaccine, but the fact that they were able to turn it around so rapidly was the fact that they see themselves more as a digital company that does biomedicine. So, and biotechnology. That's one group of companies. And then there are these legacy organizations that are like really, really changing themselves. I mentioned American Express, but I know there's a lot of work being done at MasterCard. that's employing data science, all these fraud detection, etc., getting much better and better. Walmart, I've not yet written them off. They are doing massive work in the customer behavior analysis. Procter and Gamble's work towards market segmentation, supply chain optimization. L'Oreal have both examples from this organization, wherein the legacy organization couldn't decide. But at the same time, an organization that itself had an army of beauty advisors and artists at these makeup places created the ModiFace app that advises on makeup, which is based on a lot of AI. Capital One in banking, a lot of innovative use of data science for credit risk assessment.
Maybe the resource person for this conference.
Right. So, so that brings us to the next question. And it's a bit challenging going in a bit of a monologue for an execution-oriented strategy person, but we have addressed the question on customer, we have addressed the question on partner in terms of what that question is. But when we are looking at the partner ecosystem, this itself is also undergoing a lot of change, because if the business models are going to change, right? I hinted at some of the examples in the beginning, but if you look at every single aspect of a traditional manufacturing organization, and that's the kind of question that you see in the comment section, these organizations had relationships for their ingredients and equipment supplies that were really, really deep and long lasting. That was their strength. And this relationship couldn't be broken up by a new innovator or scientist who would have come up with a new molecule, say for the detergent industry. But now platforms like Procurify or Amazon Business, etc. And then there are these consulting firms that if large organizations want to get into a new business or new geography, they will find you partners across China and India and Brazil, and would change completely the nature of the partnerships that you have had. The logistic partners, the newly aged logistics companies that optimize your route and pricing, and are able to pre-warn you that this ship has a history of not calling this port quite often. They might be booking your order, but they have a high chance of missing that date, is revolutionary. And that's what has forced the traditional companies like C.H. Robinson introducing C.H. Robinson Navisphere, or Maersk introducing Maersk Twill, which have a very different DNA than their parent organization, or a noticeably different DNA, have launched these businesses. The brand, media, and communication partners means go to an Ogilvy, get the solution done, and all the departments exist with them. Yes, they exist. But then there are platforms that allow a much smaller organization to create their podcast and the podcast advertising and direct their virtual and augmented reality content to the right consumer group, and create an impact through content marketing or the influencer groups by identifying the right kind of influencers without having a media buying house or without having such kind of very, very large and expensive divisions. I already shared the example how the brick and mortar distribution is now having an inroad with D2C and quick com, and digital aggregators as against our dealer networks that we used to have, these Urans, etc. of the world, banking partners, new age lending institutions. So the entire partner ecosystem is also undergoing a lot of change. And many of these themselves are data science first companies. So to work with them, to utilize their power, legacy organizations, manufacturing organizations, traditional organizations, the term my Harvard professor Karim Lakhani uses, the traditional organizations it's imperative for them to create this strategy function that's integrated with data science. The question, imagine everything else you could have still imagined answering a few years back, but now the product offering itself, if the business models would continuously evolve and consumers would decide what are they paying for, your product and offering is also undergoing a change. Your pricing as an element to that, dynamic that was made popular, dynamic pricing by some of the public sector organizations, airlines, railways, moving on to the cab hire element. They have a role and application in some of the other legacy industries as well. Subscription-based supply of components and parts. Consumers would decide what they value. I was told, it's not a very confirmed thing, but I was told by one of my colleagues that at a prominent cinema hall chain, you can get a reimbursement of a part of, now I've not fact checked it, but you can get reimbursed a part of your ticket money if you're leaving earlier. Now they would be doing that. Okay, I understand they are doing it because they are trying to share the risk of the consumer in terms of a bad movie out there. But it also creates a window of opportunity for them to sell that time. And this was not possible. This fractional selling of a movie at a cinema hall was not possible earlier. It's possible now. Now I can at least believe, I have to fact check it, but I can still believe that it is possible because these algorithms and the digital platforms allow it. I launch a pricing strategy and I realize it's not working. I can get to know it much before the bad news spreads. And I can change the price amongst the consumer groups. And this is responsive pricing strategy. And there can be a constant feedback loop that allows me to choose between one of these pricing or a combination of these pricing strategies in my product offering. Remember, offering has pricing as a component. Traditional components from Philip Kotler days. So when these products are to be made, our services are to be created, co-creation, we have done traditionally as well. I've myself launched a couple of brands and products over a decade back through the process of co-creation. But quite often, to be very honest, we already had some zeroed down features and attributes. And the co-creation exercise was an exercise in making the influencer consumer group believe that they were part of the process. Now you can actually co-create with them. You can make virtual prototypes and test them. And for instance, flavor combination for snacks, they can be done through a program. And just like the pharma industry has done a long time earlier, it can be done for your $2 or $1 or 50p in Indian context, 10 rupees chips pack. And you can also ensure that the R&D function and the NPD function, the new product development function that were operating earlier in silos. I have done one acquisition from, I mentioned L'Oreal. I've done an acquisition because New York and Paris, they wouldn't see eye to eye. And there was an opportunity for me to go ahead and acquire a company for my organization because these two functions wouldn't speak. Now, the need for that product was universal. The weightages attributed would have been felt much more faster if there was a data science backbone working with the strategy division. And all these offerings can be put through these A/B testing methods. As far as the existing offerings are concerned, I've experimented a lot with algorithms that make the GTM strategy much more sharper. I'm moving a little at a pace. We can touch base some of these areas in the Q&A section. I don't want to cut there. Through the various kind of churn analysis, the beautiful patterns that nature forms in the behavior of selling and non-selling outlets through the Markov's chains, the role of predictive modeling, etc., is anyways been talked about a lot. But attribute those values when you're creating a pricing strategy and you're defining what is your product to the consumer surplus factor. Consumer surplus factor is the from an economist framework, if I remember my education in the Delhi School of Economics correctly, was the gap between the price that the consumer is willing to pay and what you are charging them. And quite often, this is applicable, if you see the GDPB framework, etc. It's a lot of these digital goods like the seminar. There's an immense value that I'm getting by listening to this seminar, not just presenting to it. How do you attribute a value to it? And the consumer surplus factor, otherwise doing that in the traditional format, collecting data for that can be extremely tedious and suboptimal. It can be made a little more continuous process for the existing offerings through the use of data science algorithms sitting on the digital technology framework or backbone and augmented through artificial intelligence. Regulatory changes that the traditional CPG industry or other consumer goods industry see, sourcing and listening to this and using AI platforms, not waiting for the annual strategy workshop session, but being able to take a very, very rapid decision that what this policy change means for me as an organization is all possible, and you can reformulate your product offering on that basis. Yeah, when we are talking of all this use of data, there is a very important aspect that you'll have to keep in your context, which is in terms of ethical strategy as far as using this data. Imagine there is an organization that's that has gone public saying that, in India, you have this power of UPI, that data available to them and the payment system. And they could look at this data and they could tell that, okay, this particular number, rupees 16 Indian denomination for a single stick cigarette price is attributable to cigarette purchases. If it's very frequent, we can share this data with the insurance company. Now imagine the kind of invasion into privacy that it is. And many of these models have this tendency to still build over the existing biases. I believe that a lot of work has been done in many areas, but bias removal algorithms need to get much more strengthened. And AI needs to be used in that direction because human beings tend to look at the same data sets and same outputs and still try to overlay their biases on it and form opinions. And that's why I think, if I'm connecting the dots with the consumer surplus factor, I feel that's probably one of the reasons why Apple phones at such a price are still selling so much. It's the kind of secure and safe and confidential environment that they provide, even though the literature would harp about and talk about the design value that it brings, which it does for sure. But I think that that's the cherry on the cake. So with that, we have established that the new world of strategy is extremely interlinked with data science, analytics, AI, And most organizations in the legacy world need to survive, metamorphose into data science-led organizations. But there are many challenges that I have experienced personally in these setups. And these challenges can be classified as data-related challenges that many of you would already be knowing: quality, volume, availability. There are methodological challenges and some other day, but the fact is that statistics is often very, very wrongly used. The wrong understanding of p-values, etc., still continue to operate in the data science paradigm, and that's where I feel algorithmic work is much more reliable. And then quite often there is lack of domain expertise in these legacy organizations. They're not willing to believe that this can't be handled by the traditional marketing head or the sales head or finance head or an operations head. This needs, or a strategy head. This needs a different kind of a strategy head. There are human challenges. This calls for a lot of cultural change. Imagine an entire organization, which is several $billion, trying to decide if their new product has been successful or not by virtue of what the marketing head is saying, but by virtue of what the data science team tracker is saying. It's a massive cultural change expectation, and it happens everywhere. It's not a generation limited thing. Communicating to stakeholders, their buy-in, and acquiring talent. That's another huge challenge. After all, we are all in legacy organizations competing with the Amazons and JP Morgans and Googles of the world to attract and retain talent in the field of data science and strategy. And even when many of these data science programs are implemented, they tend to fail even in these large organizations. And one of the prominent reasons for this is that many of these projects are run in silo. I know that I'm overstretching a bit on my speaking time, but in a couple of minutes I'll wrap up and then we'll open up for Q&A. So what needs to be answered for are some of these basic questions. We can start from the fact that we need to have a data strategy in place and not just data. And good data is one that answers the specific question of the company. Everything else is not good data. So you need to have your needs identified. You need to have a good data analytics strategy in place. You will need to have a right level of skill set. The technology infrastructure needs to be invested upon in advance. And a governance layer should be built simultaneously. For a data science centric organization, if you want to formulate it, you need to work on addressing the point number 2 that I mentioned here very early on, which is introduce fairness. The data science models need to be fair from very early on, so that when you overlay the AI layer on top of it, they throw much more reliable and honest outcomes and don't just build on the existing biases. So a lot of other aspects we have spoken of, and therefore embracing transparency, accountability, ethics, all these factors are very, very significant. I clearly see that there is a massive opportunity in the face of this challenge, because this data, when you're putting it all on systems, many of these organizations were much more secure. They were not so much at risk of a virus attack like Microsoft, Zoom could have been, or some of the other organizations could have been in the technology world. Now, when this data would be going out there, you have this challenge of data theft and misuse in real time. And fortunately, unfortunately, one has to rely, one can't do without putting it on these layers. So the security threat can only be addressed again through analytics. and through the use of AI. That's the most effective, rather than trying to turn the clock back and not use them. So these AI first organizations, their feature and their look would be, they have the decision intelligence pillar, generative and agentic AI that in other forums you'll hear a lot on. Analytics need to be embedded at each stage and every function of the organization. And then the swarm learning, collaborative data sharing and production of models without one getting to see the other person's data. I think this is another solution for the data theft challenge that we spoke of. I started with what's the literature that's pre-world. It's only right for me to mention that the post data science world also has literature of a lot of early work has been published by Yuval Noah Harari. The other favorite for me has been my professor Karim Lakhani's work, Computing in the Age of AI. But some of these other work is also quite good, and there's more coming up. That's where we are. I know that I've short my time on the speaking front, but please go ahead, tell me your experience, and Mr. Abdul, we could be open for questions.
So very interesting session, Kusumakar. I think I really enjoyed. I think you answered the questions while explaining all. So I really like that AI first organization slide. Okay, and you just clearly mentioned it, what everybody should do, each department. I think that's really fantastic slide. I really liked it. Okay, AI first slide. I think it's a third slide or something from the last.
Okay, right. Absolutely. Thanks. I think you're referring to this.
Next. Yeah, this one. So this is something, yeah. No.
The one prior.
Yeah. So you talk about the decision intelligence.
Yes.
For the strategy and sales team.
Sales part of the organization.
Everything, what organization should do. I really like this. Okay. And yeah, so there are a couple of questions. I just got it and I posted it here.
Right.
If you're able to have an access to queries.
I was being able to do that sometime back, but let me just open. Yes, I can see the chats. So, right. Which one do you feel that one can start with that? I can see at about 4.
Stop screen share so that we can just.
Okay.
Will help us to. You can look at
the
questions.
Yes, I can see them, and I think one of the early questions is on thanks. There is a appreciation from Mr. Sundarraj on data analytics. There is a question that you have brought in, Mr. Abdul, from someone. I think it's about competitors emerging from everywhere. How to deal with this situation. And I think you're right that paying attention to this situation, first being cognizant. I think first and foremost is that understanding and appreciating that this is not a very static environment that we are going to work in. And my competitor can emerge from my own distribution channel, from my own consumer, and from a completely different industry. Once you acknowledge that, and with that perspective, once you look at what's happening around the world, this use of AI, particularly putting your queries in this manner to the agentic AI and the generative AI platforms that I've come across the knowledge of, say, a Donald Trump administration coming into force, and my organization does not have presently a lot of business with US, but this is the space. What do you see? as the potential set of change in the kind of competitors that are going to come up, or this thing, it throws out very interesting facts. And that's where in a emergent strategy framework that Mr. Kopat spoke of in the morning, you can keep yourself, your antes high, and try to work out which competitor that you can start focusing on much more now. So I think that's one area. I think keeping an eye on the technology development in your space is a general scanner that you can put through some of these pieces. And then the rates of growth of some of the smaller players. Quite often we consider some of the players in your industry as not your real competitors, because they are probably, say, just price players, or they are not a brand, they are a commodity. But when you put that through a data science model and you start realizing that they have got a much more impactful and loyal consumer group, which you otherwise, your traditional market research was saying they are just value seekers and not the loyalists. You start realizing that they probably have a much more sticky consumer group, and you need to work on that aspect. So that's one of the areas.
Perfect. Yeah,
I think
you also told about very important thing, that building a partner ecosystem. In this part of Bunny or VUCA, whatever, you just very nicely mentioned it. So building partner ecosystem is not an option. So it's a mandatory now. Okay, what do you think? How do you foresee the partnership ecosystem build up going forward?
So very, very correct. I think one of the deviant factors looking at the time that I would mention is that human emotions and behaviors, that's a constant. And therefore, how you make your partners feel in this entire equation is going to be universal from the past world. But having said that, relationships aren't going to be that long lasting. For us as a legacy organization wherein partnerships have existed over a couple of decades, you need to be able to, quite often these relationships were nurtured at the cost of some new potential relationships that could have come up, right? So you don't allow, and you can see that still happening out there, right? Some time back, there was this huge furore by the distributor network of Unilever as against the digital platform arrangements that they had. Now, that's the collision happening between the traditional partner channel and new. For some time, these organizations tried to avoid entering into these new relationships. Now you can't stay away, right? So the working out, reshaping your business model, which they are doing and attempting by different kind of pack formats, different kind of offerings, etc. But I think much more needs to be done. This is going to be a very evolving space, and that's what I meant by that.
So you have one more question, KP. So you can just take it up as a last question.
Okay. Over time, high-value consumers and businesses will use DuckDuckGo and other technology to opt out of tracking. This will leave low-value consumers as the main source of future data freely available. Will businesses have to pay for access of information, aka high-value data? So now, my very honest answer is the fact is that it is such an evolving space. It seems quite logical, and thank you, Martin. It clearly gives an indication that you know the space very well. But from the perspective that I'm coming in, I think the power of AI is going to come into play in some of these spaces, because being able to predict behaviors on very, very small pool of data is a value that the next stage agentic AIs should be able to bring in. And if at all they are to live up to their claim of mimicking and replacing human beings in some of their areas of work, that's what they have to do. That's what we human beings, after all, do very well. When there isn't a huge amount of data, with smaller data by virtue of our intuition and our perspective, we are able to form a view of that world. So you're right that high value consumers can go very exclusive, and that's what the confidentiality element, etc., was there in the iPhone reference that I had. But I would really love to know more in this space and love to connect with you, Martin, separately if you have your thoughts and views in this space. Thank you.
Great, great. So thank you, Kusumakar-ji. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
lecture.
Thank you,
made
everyone.
this session, you made this wonderful session very, very meaningful with the data science as a strategic driver. Thank you.
Really.
Thank you.
Best wishes.